I got a nice lady on the channel today. Y'all gonna like what she's got to tell you. She's smiling. She's on time too, everybody. Ooh, I'm super excited about this interview. You're gonna like this, my friends. I'm Anthony Brogdon, and I don't play with you because I am getting luckier and luckier by the moment finding these people to share this good history with you. It's my mission to get it to you, but the people want you to know it. They want you to hear what they know from all facets of history. And this is what I do here. So come on, hit the subscribe button on Strong Inspirations. It don't cost no money. It don't ask no information. It just let me know you like me because I like you, and ain't nothing you can do about it. It's no way around it because you have taken time out of your busy schedule to watch what is on Strong Inspirations. And what I'm going to do to you, my friends, is give it to you straight, no chaser. I'm going to try to intoxicate your mind through the guests that come on this show. Let them do the talking. It's mind-blowing stuff. Hit the like button on this video. There is no love button. Hit the notifications bell for when the videos come up. You get a ding, a shock, the lights flicker. You get a tingling in your brain. Your dog gives you a nudge, something to let you know that there is new content. For this past Black History Month, I released a video every day at 7 p.m. We got that much content. We over 500 videos on here, and we are growing. The train has left the station, my friends. Did you see the one I did with Madam C.J. Walker's great-granddaughter? And she says that Madam Walker only operated her business for 13 years. Watch that video. Did you see the one I did with the lady who says that they assume, they don't have no proof, that their great-grandfather was lynched? He was headed back home to, I don't know what state it was, to go to his father's funeral, and he never made it to the funeral. They never saw or heard of him again. Watch that video. Did you see the one where I talk with the guy who was in the music hip hop industry in the early days, and he talks about the history of hip hop? Watch that video. Did you see the one I did with the guy who spends his time, this has become his mission, finding former enslaved cabins across America, and he sleeps in them? And he chronicles this. Watch that video. You like Strong Inspirations. Oh, this is good stuff. And I got a couple more housekeeping. I'm a filmmaker, everybody. I'm not playing with you in terms of giving you some history that I know of. And I put it in this documentary. It's called Business in the Black, The Rise of Black Business in America. It is streaming on Amazon. It is good. Not just because I did it, but because I did it. I know it's good. It's 75 minutes long. How enslaved Black folks went to college and how enslaved Black folks own businesses. And so much more is in my film. Again, it's streaming on Amazon. Watch that. And then I have this book out titled Black Business Book. It's over 200 amazing Black history facts, similar to the movie, but even more so. I tell you all the ways enslaved Black people gained their freedom. Some of the unique escapes of that institution that Black folks did. All the HBCUs, all the fraternities and sororities, over 40 Black-owned banks and Black newspapers, Black organizations, how we networked among ourselves. It's all in this book. You got to get you a copy. It's on Amazon, but it's also on my website, businessintheblack.net. And let me tell you, I got one more because I'm thorough. I want your kids to read my new book, They Did It. I got 30 Black business owners in here who lived in the 1800s. I got a picture of them, their name, the year they were born, and what they did. Your kids need to know this. Get you a copy of this, and this at present is only available on my website, businessintheblack.net. I'm serious with y'all, my friends, and I did a lot of speaking this past month, and I'm still speaking. And if you need a speaker to tell you what I like to call good Black history, look me up. All right, it's all my information is on the website. And now I use that word strong a lot. It's in everything I do. In my world, strong stands for strength, tenacity, resilience, and a sense of oneness, nobility, and grace. And grace. And that is my introduction to the strong sister on the channel today. Come on, she ready to rock and roll with y'all. All right, thank you for being on.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, tell us your name.
My name is Lynette Jackson Love.
And where are you? Okay, well, since you said that, and I got to ask a couple questions about it. Let the audience get to know you. You're located where? Where were you born?
I was actually born in Chicago, Illinois. Part of my parents were part of the Black migration. My father's family was from Mississippi. My mother, South Carolina. She ended up in Chicago, and the first part of my life was really about my parents' marriage. We were in Chicago, and then we were in Camden, New Jersey, and then my parents split up, and my mother packed us up. We were in Camden and moved us to Mount Pleasant, South Carolina, into her parents' home in 1961. And basically, I finished school there, and I've lived different places since then.
Okay. When you talk about Chicago, how old were you in Chicago?
We stayed in Chicago until I was 3 years old. Then
so you don't know much of Chicago. Okay.
I used to go back in the summertime. My parents were split, divorced, and I used to spend some summers with my father in Chicago. So I had big fun in the summertime in Chicago.
What about Camden? But is that where you went to school mostly?
Well, I started school in Camden, New Jersey. When my parents moved to Camden, they moved to a branch of our family that had moved to Camden to work in the Campbell soup factories. I laugh about that branch because I said most of our family from South Carolina, they went to New York City or DC. And I think this branch, they were on their way to New York City. And when they got to Camden, they said, this is it, we're not going no further. So we were there with that branch of our family until my mother moved us to South Carolina in 61.
How was it growing up in South Carolina? That's a whole different dynamic than Camden.
Oh my gosh. I talked about it in my book. I was 9 years old when we arrived in Mount Pleasant, South Carolina. Jim Crow era. Jim Crow had a vice on that area, and it was very confusing to me because I had grown up in a mostly integrated setting in Camden, had gone to integrated schools, and I don't even think I realized I was Black until I moved there in 61. Now, I'm not saying everything was perfect in Camden, but as a kid, none of that stuff was evident to me, but it was so evident in 61 when I arrived in South Carolina. And I was kind of upset with my mother initially because I couldn't figure out why she moved us down there and all of that craziness. She herself had left the South to finish high school. Her parents sent her to New York City to an aunt to finish high school in New York City. And then she joined the Army. She joined the Army in the 40s, and she lived out west and up north. But then in 61, she had to go back home because she, economically.
Yeah, I understand.
And
okay. Let me ask you this. So we're going to stay on that as that gets into the book. But for you as a kid, you said you didn't know too much about being Black because the white kids accepted you and you could play with them real easy.
Yeah, I think it wasn't really on my radar as much as when I went down south and everything was separated and segregated, the
I
water,
got you.
schools, the neighborhoods, everything. And as a kid, I thought, wow, they actually sat down and designed and drew all of this up. And Anthony, I think one of the things that was most striking to me was the economic disparity. Um, Other people had everything, the big homes, the cars, the jobs, and everything. And Black folks were scuffling because at that time we were kind of relegated to service jobs and, low paying jobs and that kind of thing. But, I can't generalize that to everybody because some Black folks have made it and we're doing
Yeah.
well. Not
Right.
every person was wealthy,
Right.
but the economic disparity to me was so glaring.
All right. I want to go back to Camden though for a moment. When you say that, what was it easy playing with the white kids?
I don't, I don't remember a whole lot about that. I just know that in school I don't think I had even had Black teachers. But yet when I moved to Mount Pleasant, all my teachers were Black after that. And I
Yeah.
went to school, it was integrated, and I don't remember having any problems with
Yeah.
any,
Okay. Let
like
me
a
ask
normal.
you this: Did you said you didn't know about blend? Did you wish you were white at that point?
Oh no. I just, as a kid, I didn't have
Yeah.
any about it one way or the other. I was just a kid in
Yeah.
school
Yeah.
enjoying life.
Yeah.
But
When you went down to South Carolina, did you all of a sudden now have to? Did you all get a fear of Black people? Did that
no,
did that
no,
happen?
absolutely not. I had a huge family. My family, Mount Pleasant was right outside of Charleston. It was full of plantations. And, during that era. And my family were descendants off of those plantations. And I had a huge family, very loving and welcoming. And that's what really, my family helped me to adjust and grow to love growing up in that area, despite all of that craziness that was going on at that
Yeah.
time. Mhm.
How about a couple more? When you went down there, did you have to change your habits, the way you spoke? Because maybe in when you were in Camden, you spoke more, for lack of a better word, proper.
Mhm.
And then
Mhm.
you go down there and the dialect has changed, the attitude, maybe the aggressiveness towards education. I'm not sure. Did you
Mhm.
have to do something, a code switch, as it might be called, that you
I don't
noticed?
feel like I did that. Now, if you've ever been to Charleston in that area, there is a dialect, Gullah dialect, that's very,
Yeah,
people sound like they're from the Caribbean because kind of they were,
yeah,
that's
right.
y'all came in on the same boat. And there was a strong emphasis on education in those Black schools. My teachers saw that I was smart and they insisted that I do well. And that's kind of where I got the seeds of that I should go to college. They felt like, you're smart, you need to go to college. So in that era, in those segregated schools, even though the facilities might not have been uh, equal, the resources, the teachers, I think, overcame all of that because of they were concerned about you, they inspired you, they pushed you,
I love it. I love what you're saying.
disciplined you.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. I love what you're saying. I want to stay on this just a tad bit more. So when
Mhm.
you went down there, you saw the difference between the schools in Camden and the schools in Mount Pleasant.
Mhm.
Give me an example of what that difference was like and what did it look like?
Well, for me, first of all, everybody was Black. Everybody, all the students, all the teachers. That was the first difference. The facility that we were in, our school was pretty good. It was old. Uh, the busing was it during that time, they would pick up Black kids and take them to school on the bus, because there was a time when they wouldn't do that. Kids had to walk. Black kids had to walk to school and look at the buses pass you by. But I think one thing I do remember is the books were used. We got the books that were used in the other schools, and we kind of knew it because people had their names in the book, and we knew everybody in the town, so
Okay.
we knew, we got the hand-me-down stuff.
Okay. Oh,
And I
okay.
think if you looked at the numbers, you'll probably see the spending was probably much lower on our schools than the other schools. Charleston had a long history of that.
I got one more. These keep coming up. The kids down there, when you got this, or you a big city girl and you had a big city kind of swag? Because I must admit, when I go down south, I was born and raised in Detroit. I don't dress like they dress. I just be honest. And I got a certain quicker walk. I think they just know I don't. I'm not, other than they had never seen me before. They know I'm not there from there. Did you get some of that they were?
Not really, because I
Okay.
think one reason was because so many people from that area had gotten caught up in the migration, the Great Migration. And what I saw, and this was even evident in my husband's family, one sibling would go up north, New York, DC, whatever, then they'd send for the other one, and then they'd send for the other one. And then they would always come back. They would come back for homecomings.
Okay. Okay.
There was always a lot of interaction, and
Okay.
I didn't really sense that. No,
Okay.
I didn't. Now, one concern was you had to be careful where you went, what you said, and there were safety issues, because if you did the wrong thing or said the wrong thing, there could have been some violence that came against you. I didn't experience that. I think Charleston and that area was not as violent as some other places. And the reason why I believe that is because the numbers were so high. There were so many of us there that, the Black population in South Carolina was the majority population in South Carolina from the antebellum period after the Civil War well into the 1900s, because it was a epicenter of slavery, and they brought so many slaves into Charleston.
Right.
And they were out on the rivers and the islands, there were 300 plantations in Charleston County alone at the end of the Civil War. So there were just so many of us. I think that's one reason why we didn't experience the level of violence that some places did further in the South. Deep down.
Okay, I got you. But
Mhm.
who told you how to be careful then? When did you learn? Because see, you come from where you don't have to.
Right.
And then how do you? Who tells you? Oh, okay. Well, let me tell you. Don't call him boy. Don't say this to him. How did they sit you down and give you the rules of the land?
Yeah, my mom somewhat, but at that time, I don't know what your situation was, but I was raised by a whole village. All the adults had input into the children, and they were always watching. I laugh and say that, before there were satellites that were eyes in the skies, where I grew up, there were eyes on the children. So you always had adults watching, encouraging you, loving on you, telling you what to do, correcting you if you're wrong. And also my friends, they kind of knew the deal there, and they would school me on. It wasn't really uh, a lot of that, but it was there. It was there.
Okay, so on one hand, did they tell you don't go downtown? Don't, and you alluded to this. Don't go in that store.
Well,
That kind
you,
of thing.
you could go in, like, say, for example, the movie theaters were segregated. We had to sit on the top, and then we couldn't sit in the bottom. If the restaurants were, you couldn't even eat in the restaurants. You had to go around to the back door and order. food and take it out, the doctor's offices, black waiting room, white waiting room. I mean, just everything. So you kind of knew that, well, that's where you have to go. You have to go to the back door. But, one of the results of that is with that huge population of Black people in Charleston and that area, there were a lot of, they started their own businesses. You have a
Okay.
book out, there were hotels, restaurants, bakeries. So we just went and used those businesses.
Uh,
We started those businesses.
so often people will say that integration hurt the Black community. As you looked at it, did you want to get integrated and say, oh man, I wish I could go into that store or do this or do that, or I don't care? What could have been that? And why? And so I'm getting at is, why did we fight for integration in those areas so much to the detriment of our own community?
Yeah, I think, well, we were Americans, we were paying taxes, and we should have access to everything. And why should we be bottled up in one community? But yes, there were disadvantages to that. And I think one of the really great disadvantages was the schooling in some ways. Now, when I consider going to school in Camden, New Jersey, which was integrated, I didn't have any problems. I didn't have any issues, and I don't know that I would have. So, in that environment, integrated schools work. In the South, there was so much going on with Jim Crow that I think the communities, we understood that back then. We had to band together. You couldn't get money from the banks. So if anything went wrong, you people in the community would come to you and help you and give you money, because a bank was not going to give you any money. And so we had to band together. And the schools were, as I talk about the school today, Lang School, it was kind of like a safe place for children where children could grow and flourish for over 150 years during racially challenged times. And even though the facilities may have been less than, I think the teachers made up for that. The teachers encouraged you, they pushed you, they disciplined you, and really, as I've researched this book, most of the children, people who went through this Lang School that I'll talk about, and in that segregated system, have done well. They've been
Okay.
successful.
Yeah.
They
Uh,
attribute it to the teachers. Mm-hmm.
what in that city? What was the Black neighborhood called? What was the white neighborhood? And was there a railroad track that divided them?
Well, I think you have to look at the history of Charleston in that area. Charleston was the epicenter of the American slave trade. It is estimated that 40% of the Africans that came to the shores of America came through those ports in Charleston. And it's a city. And so there weren't really any plantations in Charleston proper. The plantations, and I said earlier, there were like 300 of them in the county. They were over in the town that I grew up in. They were on the waterways, the rivers, the intercoastal waterways, the islands, because that's what is in that area. It's right on the ocean. And so in Mount Pleasant, there were all these plantations. And after emancipation, people, sometimes they stayed on the plantations for a little while, but then they came off of the plantations and they went and built their communities right not far from those plantations. And they continued to work on those plantations, some of them, and over time that evolved. And so in the town that I grew up in, Mount Pleasant, they have, maybe they call them settlement communities, where the enslaved people came up off of the plantations. They built their own plantations. Those communities had schools and churches. Those are the first things they did, was they built churches first of all, and in all those communities, maybe 7, 8, 10 of them in that area. And then they built schools, and then that kind of all evolved, where these were freedmen schools, is what they called them, right after the war and shortly thereafter. And a lot of them didn't last, and later on they were merged into one big school. But the school that I'm talking about, Lang, was it lasted 150 years, and it evolved in different ways, and eventually all the descendants from those plantations funneled through Lang High School.
I got one more to give us an idea. You said settlements. Where you lived, where was the store where you bought your furniture? What street were those? What was there a main street that all the commerce went down that you had to go to? You know, you follow what I'm asking you?
King Street. King Street was the main street, and that, you know, we were like a suburb. I think back in the early days, more of a country.
Okay.
Down, and people went into Charleston to shop, and you know, there were some businesses right there in the town as well.
I
but
got you.
Majorly, you had to go over into the city of Charleston to shop. Yes.
I got you. Now, how far was the school that you speak of from where you lived, and how did you get there?
2 blocks. I walked 2
Okay.
blocks. 2 blocks, Lang Elementary. It was right in the heart of the Black section of the community. Our community was a settlement community, and it was called the Old Village Settlement Community. So people there came from the plantations that were right there in the town of Mount Pleasant.
And I won't, excuse me for diverting around. You say plantations. What is a plantation? How does that look in your community? Is 300 of them? Are they all these big houses with the pillars in the front? Is it all fenced off? What does a plantation look like that you see, and so on and so forth?
Well, I say that I kind of grew up in the shadow of plantations. A lot of them were destroyed during the Civil War, but there are some that are still left, and they've been restored, and they are huge tourist attractions. People come to Charleston. It's tourist town, and that's one of the things that they come to see. But in the town that I grew up, as well as other areas, even though there isn't a plantation now, there are subdivisions. So these plantations were huge tracts of land. And so now they have these huge subdivisions, but they were formerly plantations, golf courses. There's so many things named plantation. I hate that, really. But in Mount Pleasant, Boone Hall Plantation is the one that is left. It is very well restored. They have probably 600 visitors a day that come to visit it, 1,000 in the summertime. And I have to tell you that just this past month, for the very first time, Boone Hall Plantation collaborated with the Black community and celebrated Black History Month. So now they're telling, and we came in, or the group came in, and they did a lot on the Black history in Mount Pleasant. And so now I think that plantation is going to alter their presentation and bring in more about the descendants. What happened to the descendants? Where are they now? And that was just historic, that collaboration, and really wonderful, because I got to tell you, the history in my hometown is a mother lode. It's just a mother lode of history. For example, everybody knows of the Massachusetts 54th colored troops, right?
Okay.
from the movie Glory. They were
Okay.
headquartered in my hometown in Mount Pleasant. They were garrisoned near the street that I grew up on. They mustered out of Mount Pleasant. So, you know, that's just one aspect. There's just so much history there.
Oh, okay. Now, you have a book. Show us your book.
Okay. Um, Here she is.
Okay.
It's called Smashing Obstacles and Building Legacies. I don't know if you can see, I'll pull
Yeah,
it back so you can see it.
yeah. And
And it is about this school, but it's also about the Freedmen Schools movement, which this school was really born of, the Freedmen Schools movement, which that particular movement, after it really started
I got
during,
it. Uh-huh.
but after the war, there were about 2,000, over 2,000 schools that were built in the former Confederacy. And many of those schools didn't survive.
Okay, I got you.
Uh,
I see it. So, what is that on the cover? That's a picture of what? Of
it's
the
a,
school itself?
it's a collage. The school actually occupied about a half dozen places in its 150-year journey. And it's a collage of all the places where the school occupied.
What does
And
that mean? They had buildings, but then they moved to other buildings?
yes, they started out in a Presbyterian church. This young Quaker girl, she was 26 years old, and she came to Mount Pleasant alone 1 year after the Civil War. And she decides, she came down there. She said she was sent by God. And she decides, I'm going to go over to Mount Pleasant. I'm going to start a school for the freedmen. She didn't have a real plan. She had limited resources, but she started that school. And that school went on to last for 150 years. She started it in a Presbyterian church, which had been serving as a Confederate hospital. And it was bullet riddled, you know, when she went in. And then she stayed in that school, and the town, like the town of Mount Pleasant, like the rest of the South, was under Union occupation after the war. So the provost marshal and the Freedmen's Bureau was located there. They helped her move into another building, and then they built a school. The Freedmen's Bureau built a school in 1868. And then later on, a hurricane came through and damaged it. And the next year, an earthquake destroyed it. So they had to rebuild that school. And while they were rebuilding it, they held the school in the AME church, Friendship AME church, very small, cramped situation, but these people were very resourceful, and they made that thing work for 2 years. So then they moved into another school, and then, you know, during this time, the Quakers were overseeing that school and pouring resources into it. And you know something, Anthony? I think that's the reason why that school survived, because they poured resources into it. And then in the 40s, they turned the school over to the school authority in the town. And
Oh,
then they
okay.
built a new school, and they built a new high school. So it's occupied, you know, a lot of different places.
You say for the people who might not know, the Freedmen's Bureau. What do what's their history? What is that?
Okay. You know, the Freedmen's Bureau was started after the Civil War. Um, the abolitionists really, they are the ones that agitated for that bureau. They did a survey, they sent a questionnaire out, and they are the ones who convinced the government to start the Freedmen's Bureau, because 4 million people were going to come out of slavery. What they didn't have anything. What was going to happen to them? So,
Right, right.
so the Freedmen's Bureau had a kind of a mixed legacy. They did some things well, and they did some things not that well. But building schools, they did well. And they helped to build several hundred,
Right,
several.
right, right.
Mhm.
And I can chime in. The Freedmen's Bureau was a governmental agency,
Right.
and so that was their efforts.
Mhm. I
At the
add
links, huh?
to that, the Freedmen's Bureau, from what I read, the people that worked in it came from the army. You know, they were
Okay,
military, so
right.
they kind of had a military based approach to things. And sometimes that worked and sometimes that didn't work. And then they were from all over, they had different opinions and attitudes about the
Right,
free. Some were,
right,
did a good job, some, were
right.
corrupt.
Well, when you said going to the school, why is it called Lane?
Well, it was named after a gentleman, Henry Lang. He was a Quaker from Philadelphia, and he was the treasurer of two Quaker organizations that funded Lang School. And he was an abolitionist.
Okay,
He was just an incredible advocate for the school. He took charge of sending the money to the school, the teachers' salaries and the money that they needed. And then one thing that I discovered is that because the Quakers backed this organization and Cornelia Hancock, who founded it, was a Quaker, they had a lot of patrons from Quaker patrons who would put barrels together and they would send clothes and aid and books and uh, school supplies every month. And sometimes they would get 10 barrels
I
of.
got you.
And so Henry Lang was responsible for um, overseeing the shipment of those barrels of supplies every month to the school. And plus, the teachers, he was one who really took care of the teachers and
I got you.
looked at
Yeah.
their needs, meeting their needs and helping them. They loved him. Mhm.
I would suspect that in the early days, most of the administrators, the lady who founded it, and the teachers were white.
Mhm.
When do you suspect that might have converted to where black people actually, ran the school, the teachers, and things of that sort?
Well, the first two women who ran the school were white, and a lot of the teachers were because there wasn't a huge supply of black men and women who were trained to teach. So, but after the first two administrators left, there were 10 principals of Lang School. The additional 8 were African American. And one of the objectives of the uh, Freedmen School movement and the missionaries and the abolitionists who helped work with the Freedmen to found those schools was to build a cadre of black teachers. And that was what they worked on. They Avery School in Charleston.
Right.
Um, and so by the time the second lady left, her name was Abby Monroe. She ran that school for 37 years. 37 years. She was from Rhode
Okay.
Island.
Okay.
And by the time she died, there were teachers who had been black teachers who'd been to Avery and other schools who were ready to step in and be teachers and administrators. Mhm.
What was there? A lot of times the schools have specific subjects and areas that they specialize in to teach. Was there that in the earlier days? Like let's teach farming, or let's teach this, let's teach that to get the students prepared for life.
Right, right. One thing that was so interesting to me was that the Quaker lady, Cornelia Hancock, that founded the school, when she came to Mount Pleasant, of course, the South had been devastated. Everybody was struggling, and black people were struggling. They had nothing. And they came to school in rags and no shoes. So she started classes for dressmaking and the shoes. And then the Quakers and the benefactors from up north would send clothes, send material, send the supplies to make shoes. So the cobbling and the dressmaking, that was what they focused on. It was never really farming, but they did have shops, and other schools may have, but this was not, Lang's situation. And they were, I read later on, there was this kind of like tension between classical education and industrial education. You may know about it.
Yeah, sure.
Versus other people. And that tended to be a little bit of a tension there at that school. But they started out grades 1 through 5, and then as the time went on, it went to 7th grade, and until it finally became a high school.
Right. Did they ever have any strife where the people, because of racism, tried to shut them down or anything like that?
I didn't read anything about it like that. I know that at the very beginning, the people in the town didn't like the school. They didn't like the teachers. They called them Yankee teachers, nigger teachers. They isolated them. That was a stress that the teachers, coming from the North had to deal with.
Yes.
There were a couple of race riots in the town, but I don't know that the school was caught up in any of that. I think the school, they protected that school. The church, one thing about the freedmen schools, if you read anything about them, not just in that town, the Black churches were like the overseers, the protectors, the covering. They looked out for those schools, and they protected them and highly valued them. I mentioned how this one church allowed them to come into their church when the earthquake leveled it, but also for many years the graduations were held at that church. So there was that symmetry where the freedmen, they valued those schools and they protected them, and the church was kind of like at the center of that. And one thing I did, I read in many places, the freedmen wanted schools. They were demanding schools. They were asking for schools. They started schools even when there wasn't buildings. They would have, and outside in a barn, anywhere they would come together. There's a lot of references to that, and they felt like, our ancestors felt like, of all the things that was done to them, that withholding education was the one that caused the greatest harm to them.
That's right. Now you had the Lang school that, like you said, might have went up to the 5th grade. So it taught some math, some reading, some writing, and some skill set. What would happen after that, for the most part? Was there another school that kids could get, maybe go up to high school and so on and so forth?
Right. If you were in Mount Pleasant, there wasn't a high school in Mount Pleasant until probably in the 40s. And it went up to maybe 10th grade, 11th grade. So people would send their children other places to finish high school. For example, in my family, my aunt went into Charleston to Avery Institute, which turned out many of the Black teachers in that area.
Okay.
And my mother, my grandparents sent my mother to Harlem in New York to finish high school. So, that's what a lot of people did until that high school was built. But, the school itself, Lang School, was highly regarded. People moved to Mount Pleasant so their kids could go to Lang. And I'm talking early days, their kids would come and they would board in the town during the week so that they could go to school. So it was,
Oh, I
you
love
know, it
that.
was highly regarded. Plus, I think it was all a part of that mentality that they had, that we got to get schooling. We got to get our kids in school, and they need to learn, and they need to work hard at it. Mhm.
Once after Lang, did other schools pop up? The school system. When did there be a normal set of educational opportunities?
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Well, I think, as I mentioned before, the enslaved, formerly enslaved, the emancipated people came off those plantations and formed their communities, and they built schools. First they built churches, and then they built schools. A lot of those schools were built with the support of the Freedmen's Bureau. The AMA, American Missionary Association, was huge in helping to build freedmen's schools. um, Later on, there were philanthropists like Julius Rosenwald, the
Right.
Rosenwald. There were a
Right.
couple of Rosenwald schools in our town, and then
Okay.
another Quaker lady by the name of Ann Jeanes in the early 1900s. She donated $1 million to build freedmen schools in rural areas in the South. So these schools were built, but the continued funding of them tended to be a struggle, because once they were turned over to the local school board, that funding disparity
Right.
situation
Right. Right.
caused a lot of them to fail.
Right.
Now, as I mentioned, I think it survived because it had that Quaker backing. The Quakers poured money and resources into that school. They sent doctors down every year. They When that school was leveled by the earthquake, they raised $1,000 to rebuild that school. That backing was such a blessing, and that's why that school still stands today, in my opinion.
Yeah.
I think that they built those schools in all those different communities, and then in my hometown in 1953, because they were sued, uh, you know, the state was taken to court about the disparities in funding. They consolidated the schools that were left. Some of them failed, some of them closed, but they consolidated those schools into one school, Jenny Moore Elementary. That's the one in our town. Plus, there was Lang still going. And then those two schools, all the African American people in the area came to those schools. And then when they graduated, they went on to Lang High School.
Oh,
Mhm.
I got you.
Mhm.
A couple more. One of the things that we've heard people say that he only had a fifth grade education, or he only, you know what I mean, or he only had a ninth grade education.
Mhm.
Uh, and then we come to learn that a lot of it's because they had to help the family. They had to go to work.
Mhm.
What's that dynamic?
You know, the dynamic, yes, that did occur, but the dynamic that I saw was that parents wanted their kids to get an education. They wanted you to go to school. They wanted you to do well. They expected you to do well, and they expected you to respect those teachers and listen to those teachers. So that was what you're speaking about was there, but I think the other dynamic I saw more than anything else.
Did you go to Lane?
I went to Lang Elementary, and when I finished Lang Elementary, I went to a Catholic school, but it was a segregated Catholic school. There was a Black Catholic school in Charleston and a white Catholic school in Charleston. And I went to Immaculate Conception School, and in 68 they closed it and merged the two schools, the Black Catholic and the white Catholic. And then I came over to Moultrie High School during, it's kind of like the beginning of integration.
Mhm.
And so I got caught up in that stuff. And
Yeah.
I finished 2 years at Moultrie and came out. And then that's when they really kind of closed Lang High School,
Oh,
and it became a middle school. And that's you see that I think a lot too with those schools where the segregated schools became middle schools.
Oh, okay.
If they survived,
Yeah. May I ask this? Did you go to college?
Yes, I went to North Carolina Central University in Durham, North Carolina, and HBCU.
Yeah, sure.
Mhm.
So
Major.
from the high school you went to college, did you feel you were prepared for college?
Yes, I think I was. I definitely was. I felt like um I was a little bit behind in math, a little bit behind in math, but I had to work hard. I majored in chemistry.
Oh, really? Oh, okay.
So, I was taking high level math, and I felt like when I got into those high level math courses, I could have had more, but some of that was my own fault in terms of what I chose to take in high school.
Yeah. And so you go to college, where a lot of your classmates from the high school, did they go to college? Or if they didn't, what else would they have done? What's some other options,
A
educationally or otherwise?
large percent went to college, mostly to HBCUs. The area that I came from, if most kids, if they were going to college, went to South Carolina State College and
Okay.
Orangeburg, Benedict, or Claflin. I chose to go to North Carolina Central University, but there was also a lot of participation in the military. A
Oh,
lot
really? Okay.
lot of well, in the 60s, people were being drafted, because of the Vietnam War, and some
Sure.
people, they got out ahead of it, the draft, and chose, where they wanted to go. But in that hometown, in fact, this past month, as they were celebrating Black History Month there, they did a display, they did some research, and that participation in the military goes back to World War One.
Okay, I got you. What is there something that they celebrate of Lang? Is there a founding day that a lot of students might come back to, or that's one question, yes.
Well, Lang School today exists as an integrated middle school of STEM school, science, technology, engineering.
Oh, okay.
So the old Lang High School was demolished in 2020, and that the Alumni Association, they would have every year they'd have reunions, class reunions. They celebrated, the 100th year anniversary, the 150-year anniversary
Okay.
when the school was before it was demolished. And this just shows you how much love that school was. The alumni school had a gathering where they walked the building one last time before it was demolished, and then they wore their blue shirts. I have this picture in my book, and they took a picture in front of the school. And then, really, even before it was demolished, they had a historical marker ceremony in 2020.
I love it.
Where they went all out. They went through the history. They celebrated each principal, the teachers.
I love it.
The love for that school was
Yeah.
something that, well, I got it because I'm of that generation, and I understood. I remember parents talking about it, because in that town, if you didn't go to a Lang school, so like our children now, because of integration, didn't go to a Lang school, even though my kids weren't raised up there. But if you didn't go to a Lang school, your mama went to a Lang school. Your
Okay.
grandmama probably went to a Lang school,
I
and
got you.
great grandma.
Yeah.
So it was much, much beloved.
I got you. A couple more. Is there a motto or a Lang song? What's the colors of the school? Did they have a mascot? Any of that kind of thing?
The mascot was Wolverine, and the theme, I believe, I hope I get this right, was strive to achieve. And as I interviewed 4 of the graduates of Lang High School, that went, these were people that went all the way through from Lang Elementary to Lang High School. And one thing that they talked about was the teachers, how they thought they were the best teachers in the world, and that they motivated them and they pushed them, and they constantly talked about achieving and getting out in the world and making their mark. And it worked, because
Okay.
well. Mm-hmm.
I got a couple more. What made you decide to write this book?
Well, in 2020, they had that historical marker ceremony, and I wasn't in town. I wasn't there when it happened, but I watched it online. And they started talking about the founding, and they talked about Cornelia Hancock. I had never heard of her. And I'm like, well, who is this? Why haven't I heard about her? And then I started researching and uncovered this story, this rich history, this Quaker woman, this woman from Rhode Island, the Quakers and earthquakes and hurricanes, and I thought, this is a story. I'm going to try to write it.
I love it.
Mhm.
Have you had book sightings there in town, and alumni come out and celebrate you chronicling the history?
I just released it, and guess where
Oh, okay.
where I launched it? Boone Hall Plantation, of all places. If you had ever told me I would be launching my book at Boone Hall Plantation, but the people there were very welcoming and very helpful. We had a big turnout, and they are ready. They're indicating that they're ready to tell a more full story of Boone Hall Plantation and the descendants. So,
The book is available where? How do people buy the book?
okay, selling directly to the consumer from my website. I have a store there, LynetteLove.com. LynetteLove.com.
Okay. Yeah, we'll
Mhm.
we'll put all that in the description.
Mhm.
You're proud of yourself. This is a big accomplishment. How long did it take you to do it and stuff?
3 years.
Okay.
And I had times when I thought, I'm done. I'm not doing this no more. The
Yeah.
rejections kind of really mess with my head. It's like maybe nobody is interested in it, but it really is a fascinating story. It's
Yeah.
rich history. It's one thing I got out of it the most is the perseverance of our ancestors.
Yes, there you go. There you
I
go.
understood that, but this kind of brought it to me in a fresh way. And I'm thinking, did they have steel coursing through their veins?
Right.
Because we didn't really talk yet about the freedmen school movement. It was born during the Civil War. So during the
Yeah.
Civil War, you may be familiar with this. The enslaved people, when they heard, they thought, they believed the Union Army was nearby. Those that could ran. They ran on
Yes.
plantations to the tune of 500,000 to 800,000 of them, and
Yes.
up in these camps. And initially, it was pretty tough going. They didn't have anything. I mean, the Union Army, they were following the Union Army. The Army didn't really, in their plans, for this war to have thousands of people following them. So food and clothes, and then sickness, the smallpox hit really hard. Children, it took a heavy toll on children. And then, the emancipated people started working for the Union Army, doing labor, all kinds of labor for them. 200,000 of them joined the Army, and they were in these camps, and especially on the West and on the Eastern Shore, like in the Sea Islands. The Union just kind of occupied those islands, but in North Carolina coast and Virginia coast. But in the West, Grant was systematically marching down, freeing up that Mississippi River. And the slaves, the emancipated people sometimes had to pick up and follow the army. And so it was chaos, and the country didn't kind of know what to do. It's like, what are we going to do with all these people? They need something. So they sent a call out to the nation, the North and the West, and those people responded. They sent tons of clothes and aids, and then they started sending books, and then they started opening schools in
There
those.
you go. I love it.
Mm-hmm.
Oh man, everybody, I tell you here at Strong Inspirations, we give you all forms of Black history. And at the end of the day, in any instance, you can come up with a good storyline.
Mm-hmm.
And here's a good storyline
Mm-hmm.
throughout the story. Despite the strife of the institution of enslavement, we're going to learn how to read and write and come up with this one. How about this? There were white folk who helped us.
Absolutely. And I learned more about that than I knew, because I've been in Jim Crow, and that's what I saw growing up. But them Quakers, they my new heroes. And the abolitionists, they were like, slavery is wrong, and we're going to get rid of it.
There you go.
They were fierce, and they were unrelenting. So yes, we did have advocates.
Yeah. That's the last word, everybody. Again, hit the subscribe button on Strong Inspirations. Hit the like button on this video. Hit the notifications bell. Tell somebody about us, and I go to her website. Spell your name so that people make sure they got it spelled correctly, and how they can get the book.
LYNETTE. Love, LOVE, LynetteLove.com.
Everybody go there and get that book. It's good. It's very well written. It's got that Lang education that lets you know that it's grammatically correct, and so on and so forth. And are there some pictures in the book? Pictures too?
I have 45 pictures. Most of
there's even pictures of probably graduating classes and so on and so forth. Learn about that history, as it is similar throughout the country.
Yes.
I thank you so very much for coming on Strong Inspirations. Everybody go to my website, businessintheblack.net. And to you, my sister, I say this, and I mean this with all sincerity. I want you to stay strong, stay safe, stay on your grind. I've loved what you've done. You took that experience of the New Jersey, the going down there in South Carolina, which I'm sure at points you were like, oh man, why are you doing this to me? And it worked for you. It made you who you are today. You listened to the teachers, you got that education, and then you said, let me chronicle some of my experience because of this. And you've done it so eloquently. Thank you so very much for that.
Thank you.
Thank you for coming on the show.
Thank you for the good work that you're doing in terms of keeping our history in the forefront and keeping it alive.
Hey, I'm gonna keep doing it, and it's people like you to help me. Thank you, and I'll say bye-bye.
Okay.
Bye.